turn with me to 2 Samuel 11:1. We have a really short verse this morning we're going to read really quickly together. And it kind of sets the stage for where we'll actually be going and where we'll be heading in the future with today. It says, "In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem." And that's what I want to talk about when our places or when we go to areas in our life where we shouldn't be and the consequences that it causes us to be in those. So Heavenly Father, we pray that as we begin this morning, as we hear a message from your word, God, we pray that you would speak to us, that you would remind us what it means to be a people after your own heart, and that it usually takes us stepping out in ways that we're not anticipating it. So be with us now and speak to us clearly. We ask this in your name. Amen. All right, now you can go ahead and be seated. So I wanted to start here. We're actually going to be spending a lot of time in 2 Samuel 12, but I wanted to set the stage because there's something pretty important that's taking place here. And in the very beginning of this whole discourse, as you begin in 2 Samuel 11:1, following all the way through 2 Samuel 12, there's a pretty interesting dynamic that takes place. As you look at where David should be, where David is, and where David ends up, there's this really interesting pattern and chain of events that take place. If you know the story at all, we're dealing with the story of Bathsheba and David. And so, at the very beginning of this, at the very opening of this story that is told about David's life and his continual down-stepping into sin deeper and deeper, we see that he wasn't where he was supposed to be in the first place. And I think that's important for us to know because there are times in our lives when we're going to do things or we're going to be in places where we know we shouldn't be, but we're struggling to get out of those situations. That we try to cover up what may have been a really small little white lie, and over time it just continually gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're not able to find our way out easily. I had a first-hand experience with this somewhat similar, well, not similar, but with this continual pathway of having to lie and having to try to cover your tracks. And in South Dakota, they do something, may not be the smartest, but they give teens their driver's licenses when they become 14. It's to help with farm and equipment and everything else. And so at 14 years old, even though I didn't work on a farm, I was able to get my license or my permit to be able to start driving by myself. And in a town of 5,000, that's not too bad. And I want to start with the very first time when I knew what I needed to do and did it the right way. I was coming down a hill, and I had a square or hexagonal-like bug called Plymouth Horizon. So, I mean, if you can picture a bug only squared, you'd understand how small the car was that I was driving. And I was coming down this hill, and I see lights trying to pull me over. And so I pull over, and the guy comes up to the car, and I knew him because he's one of my dad's friends, and he said, "You know, I pulled you over." I was like, usually I'd say yes, but I honestly don't have a clue. I was like, I was doing 25, I used my blinker, I just got my license, so I'm making sure I'm doing everything really carefully. He's like, "Well, yeah, you were doing 25, but you're in a school zone. And it's 15 in school zone, so you're going 10 miles over what you're supposed to be doing." I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. And so he gave me a warning. I'm pretty sure it's because he knew my dad. And so I was like, before I go to golf practice, I better head home because I lived in a town of 5,000 people. And my dad knew everybody and their grandmother and their great-great-grandmother and their great-grandmother's dog and what happened to it. I mean, small town. And so I get home, and I go in, and my dad was upstairs working on the computer, and I said I got pulled over. I got a warning. He's like, "Yeah, I got 3 people have already called me. I already knew." And this was like a process of going 5 blocks to my house. My mom got home after she got off work, and she said, "Yeah, I had 3 parents tell me that they saw my son pulled over," because it's right by the grocery store. And so I was like, yeah, everybody knew. And so I learned my lesson. I got in trouble, but it wasn't really that bad. And so fast forward about another 6 months, and I'm in a bigger town. I was supposed to go to a friend's house, and drove, and I was doing everything I was supposed to, and this car rear ends me at a stop sign. I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. And so I get out, and there's no damage to my car. I was like, praise the Lord. And the guy gets out of his car, and he's like, he's an older guy. I don't know that he could really see. And he said, we need to call the cops and everything and get this taken care of. But if we can do this as minimally as possible, it would be great, because this is my third accident this week. And being 14 and a half, and this guy is well older, I'm like, how? I've had my license less than this and haven't been in this many accidents. Like, what are you doing? And so I was like, you know what, that'll be better, because I'm not really supposed to be driving this much in an area that I'm not familiar with. So if my dad doesn't find out, we don't have to call the insurance company. That'll be great. But when you call the cops, they take your insurance information and they let them know anyway. I didn't know that. And so I got home that day, and my dad said, how did everything go? I said, great, everything went fine. We were able to have fun. We got hurt. We didn't do anything stupid. And life continued. And it was good. My dad didn't know that it was an accident. It wasn't even my fault. I was like, life's good. And about 3 months later, my dad calls me up to his office, and he said, so, you remember your trip to Rapid City? It's like, yeah. He said, how did that really go? I was like, fine. Like, I don't understand where this is going. At 3 months, teenager-wise, I really didn't remember what had happened. I remember I went to Rapid City, but that was the extent of it. And he said, well, I got an interesting phone call today. He's like, my insurance agent called and asked how I was doing for my accident. And I told my insurance agent I didn't get in an accident. I don't know what you're talking about. He said, well, it happened on this date, and you were in Rapid City, and this was the officer, and it looks like it was an elderly gentleman. And I said, no, that wasn't me. My wife hasn't been there. And then kind of this light clicked in his head. Oh, my son was in Rapid City. He said, what was the vehicle? And he said, it was this Plymouth Res. And he's like, yeah, it was my son, and we'll talk about it because I don't know anything about this. And so I was up in my dad's office, and he was going through all this, and I was like, yeah, this isn't going to be good. And so I dealt with the consequences of not being my fault, but not telling and lying about what happened and the consequences that happened because of it. And part of that would have been okay, because if I would have just gone to my friend's house and we wouldn't have actually drove around Rapid City like we weren't supposed to, none of this would have happened. And that's where we're getting at with David, is David stayed behind. And it wasn't necessarily that him staying behind was a sinful act. He knew where he was supposed to be as the king. God had called him and put him in charge of Israelites' army to protect the people, to go to war, to battle. And that's why it sets this up, is you need to make sure you're where you're supposed to be. Because as we get into the story of Bathsheba, the reason that he was able to be even tempted and led down into that sin, I don't know if you caught this part, but it says all of the Israelite army. We live in a little bit different time frame, but if you said all the Israelite army, who is missing from Jerusalem? What group of people? All the men. So David was in a town where all the men were missing and there were only women present. It seems like a setup for failure, like right from the very beginning of that. Like if you had to think through it, it's like, yeah, that's not a smart move on your part, dude. And so we see just kind of a chain of events beginning where David is in a place where he shouldn't be. It's setting himself up for temptation and failure. I don't know if you have ever watched the shows on TV late at night. My friend and I got in trouble, or almost got in trouble, because we were up till 2 o'clock in the morning watching infomercials. And we were told nothing ever good happens between 11 and like 5 o'clock in the morning. It's just not a good, you don't do anything. And so we're up at 2 o'clock in the morning watching infomercials, convinced that we need to buy this $200 knife that can cut through a lead pipe that is meant for tomatoes. And I'm not joking, like, we were convincing ourselves, like, that would be really nice. Like, not only could we use it for our food, broke college students, by the way, $200 knife. Not only could we be using that for food, but, like, we could use it for other things that happen in our apartment. And, like, we were convincing each other, like, well, if you pay this much and I pay this much, then we can get the knife and I don't know what happened. We either fell asleep in the middle of a phone call or whatever, but we didn't end up buying it. But if you're not in the places where God wants you to be, really bad things can happen really, really quickly. If you look at people that leave church, that have been in church for a while, you can kind of see where the patterns begin to happen. That if you take yourself out of community of people, that your mindsets shift. You may not be as happy, you may be more grumpy or irritable. You don't have that joy or that excitement to do things. And the more you remove yourself from the places you're supposed to be, the harder things get. And so we see in David's life where not only is he not where he's supposed to be, but then he sees a woman because he's on a rooftop that he shouldn't have been on. And so if we go down the chain of events in David's demise in Samuel's account, we have not being at war, which may not have been a sin in itself. But then he lusted after a woman that was not his wife. And then he had an affair with a woman that was married to another man. And then he murdered somebody to try to cover up what he did. And at the end, thinks he gets away with it. And so you can kind of see how we have this step-down process of because he wasn't where God had placed him, where he was supposed to be, we see all these other events that take place because of it. And so that brings us to 2 Samuel 12. And we're going to jump in about verse 5 here in a second. But I want to go back and look at Nathan and explain what's going on so we don't spend a lot of time in the backstory. Nathan came to David to confront him about his sin. David thought he had gotten away with it. He thought he had taken care of all his loose ends, that nobody will know. And Nathan comes and says, God has seen what you have done. And so Nathan gives him this parable or this story about a rich man who had everything that he possibly could have. He had hundreds of sheep and cattle. He had everything. And there was this poor man that had one sheep, one ewe lamb. And over the course of the event, Nathan said, the rich man stole the one sheep that the poor man had. And so we're going to pick up in 5 with David's response after hearing what happened to the poor man. It says, David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for the lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are this man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all of Israel and Judah, and if this had been too little, I would have given you more. Why do you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? It's interesting that David is the one to judge himself. It's interesting that he is so blinded to the story of what's going on that he can't see what he had done in and of himself. And we're going to continue on, but as you look at this and as you look at what David did, he actually cast judgment on himself, which will come to pass in later chapters. We'll see that David's judgment on himself, he ends up paying for everything 4 times over. As you look at the calamity that happens to his house that he talks about in verse 11, and you see his daughter being raped by their brother and their brothers and all of his sons dying off. And I mean, you can see the tragedy that falls on David's house because of the sin that he had and because of the own judgment that he passed. You can see how his anger and how the situation, he understands the severity of what this man did, but doesn't see it for himself. He doesn't see it until it's too late when everything has already gone completely wrong. And I think as Nathan said those words, that you are this man, that this is you that I'm talking about, the rich man in this story is you, that there had to be this sinking and gut-wrenching feeling taking place in David, realizing, I've really done it now. David, a man after God's own heart, and if you've been with us for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about this anointed place, this anointed person, that as we look at David, he was anointed to be king. And last week, not taking vengeance on Saul because it was God's anointed. Nathan here again says, this is what the Lord says, I anointed you king over Israel. I anointed you to be the shepherd, the person that is supposed to be caring for this nation. and this is the evil you do in my eye. This is how you repay me for that. What I find even more interesting is that he talks about everything that he gave David. I gave you all of Israel and Judah, and if this had been too little, I would have given you more. I think, and I'm really excited about our chili. It smells wonderful, and I'm excited about the meeting that's taking place afterwards about casting our vision, because we don't ask often enough for God to do immeasurably more. That we have our mindset in this worldly fixed focus that we think we can get out of situations, or we can do things on our own, and if we would just ask, if we would actually just seek Him and do what we're supposed to do, or be where we're supposed to be, He would give us more. I've never had all of what David had. I don't know that I really want to. But the fact that it says that David gave him all of Israel and Judah, I mean, you think of the massive land area that was. And if that wasn't enough, I would have continued to give you more. That if we're a man and a people after God's own heart, if we're women after God's own heart, not me particularly, but you, what would it look like if we asked for God to increase areas? What would it look like if we asked God to increase the areas in our life of abundance in spiritual growth or discipleship or understanding? If we're called to work and serve in our community somewhere, what would it look like if we asked that God would bless us in those areas so that He would be known in a different way? What if we actually did what we were called to do in the areas we've been called to be? Because if you look at David's life, he was king. He was supposed to be over all the people. He was already a shepherd. He knows how to do that job really well. Nathan used an example that he would know, talking about sheep and the importance of stealing someone else's sheep, especially when they have very little. And so we each have these areas that we can be used in. Whether it's at our home, our jobs, if it's with our friends and meeting people, there are things that we can be doing. But here's what I think happens, and we see this abundantly clear in David's life, is we don't go. We find comfort in staying in a palace or in our places of rest, where we're unwilling or we're afraid to step out and be stretched in a way that may make us feel uncomfortable, even though we know that that's where God has called us to. I think some of the deepest issues that we have start from us being bored or idle or just having our minds wander without us. I think that the dangers come when we have nothing to do. I remember the conversation Sergio and I had, and I talked about this last week. They said, well, you never slow down. You never stop moving. There's always something next. And I do have a problem being able to sit still and finding rest easily. And part of it is I know that if I sit too long or become too idle, that there's this restlessness for me to find something to do. We were talking about the snow and love snow. I've lived in places where snow has been mass amounts, so this is nice to see it again. And we were talking about kind of those idle decisions. And going back to teens, everybody plug their ears if you're teens. Old people, I'm not worried about doing this because we're smarter now. But we would find car hoods and tie them to the back of a Ford Explorer in the snow and be pulled around in the fields and possibly the streets because we got bored. They canceled school, and obviously we could drive, so, I mean, there were some logistical reasons that we shouldn't have been driving. But, I mean, we got bored, and so we found things to do. They may not have been the smartest things, but we found things to do. We did inner tubes, snowboards. I mean, you name something you could pull behind a car, and we probably tried it. And it didn't always end well. I remember snow is not good for me, especially idleness. Has anybody seen the really large slingshots that you designed for water balloons? Real quick, everybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. So we got bored and thought it'd be really cool to see how far we can shoot them. And we're standing on top of a hillside, and so we were getting them pretty decent. It's like, I think we just hit the road down there. What if we could try to hit a car as we're doing this? And not smart, because we did have the cops called on us, and they came up, and we actually ended up going down to the police station with the nice police officers, and they explained the dangers and the illegal activities that we were doing, trying to cause harm, even though in our minds we weren't thinking, oh yeah, it's going to cause harm. It was like, ooh, moving targets. But when you're idle, your mind does things, not necessarily good things. And they cause us to go places where we didn't want to end up. They cause us to see things in a way that's like, yeah, I made a major mistake there. And I still have some friends that I believe still kind of have that mentality. I'm sure if I had time to, I would revert back to that, which is why I keep busy. But here's the next side, and this is the part that is the most important, because we can see the stair-stepping effect of going down if we don't allow ourselves to be used in the places God wants us to be. That if we don't go and we're not actively seeking Him and keeping that focus on Him, we can start to be led down different directions we don't want to go to. And so I want to jump ahead. Go with me, if you will, to verse 18. And so Nathanael just said that because of everything you did, there's going to be calamity that's going to happen to your house. The child that is born to Uriah's wife, and it's not David's son, it's Uriah's wife, is going to die. And so on the seventh day, the child died. David's attendants were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they thought while the child was still living, he wouldn't listen to us when we spoke to him. How can we now tell him that the child is dead? He may do something desperate. David noticed that the attendants were whispering among themselves, and he realized the child was dead. Is the child dead? He asked. Yes, they replied, he is dead. Then David got up from the ground after he had washed, put on lotion, and changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. Then he went to his own house, and at the request they served him food, and he ate. We have two responses that we can take. That when we go down that road of negativity, or the road of sinful actions that just you kind of have those piling up, we have two actions. We can either stay there and kind of have a pity party for ourselves, saying we're never going to be able to get back from this, nobody could ever do, and we can fill in those blanks. Or we can take a lesson from David, the man after God's own heart, and if we're trying to be people after God's own heart, it'd probably be a good place to start. That if you look at this, David's response is that he is praying, he is fasting, he is trying to beg and plead for the life of his child, because the child wasn't the one that made the choices. And sometimes our choices and the things that cause us to go down those roads that we didn't want to go down, the paths that lead us deeper and deeper to sinful actions, don't necessarily affect us the most as they do those around us. There's this unintentional consequences of events that we don't necessarily see everything clearly. The story about trying to hit the cars with a snowball, we didn't see the consequence of us trying to do that and the disaster that could happen to someone else. When we have those sinful actions, we don't see what's going on around us. And so David's trying to plead for something that this child didn't even do. It was nothing that he had in his own fault. But now that the child was dead, now that there was nothing else David could do, he does two things that are interesting and something that I think we need to take a lesson from. After the child was dead, he got up, washed himself, put on lotion, and changed his clothes. So he removed himself from his pity state. He didn't allow himself to stay in a place where his past was going to haunt him. He got up, he cleaned himself up, he made sure he smelled nice because it had been a while since he had taken a bath, and he got everything changed. That outer self, that ugly and dirty self was no longer there. And then the next thing he did is he went to the house of the Lord and worshipped. And he began this process of going back to where he needed to be in the first place. That if he wouldn't have stayed at home and he would have done what God had called him to do and would have continued to worship the Lord and kept his focus there, none of this would have ever taken place. And so he begins this process of moving back to where God had called him, doing the things that he knew God was telling him to do. And as we end in the story, go ahead and jump with me to 26. We're going to close out with 26 through the end. It says, "Meanwhile, Joab fought Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal citadel. Joab then sent messengers to David, saying, 'I have fought against Rabbah and taken its water supply. Now muster the rest of the troops and besiege the city and capture it. Otherwise I will take the city, and it will be named after me.' So David mustered the entire army and went to Rabbah and attacked and captured it." Like I said, the reason I started in the beginning in 11:1 is to see things come full circle. That David wasn't where he was supposed to be. And I mean, this is a lengthy period of time for a child to have been born. I mean, we're talking over 9 months. And so David has been in Jerusalem by himself, kind of having this pity party for his mistakes and everything that he has done, knowing that he's wrong. He knows he should have been at war. He knows that he should have been with the Israelite army and the king's men and doing what God had called him to do and protecting and advancing the kingdom of Israel. And we see here that after everything is done, he returns to the place he was supposed to have been in. That after everything was said and done, that God said, this is where I'm placing you, this is your job. I didn't call you to sit in your nice palace and rest and be among comfort. I called you to do something for me. And we see him returning back to where he was supposed to be. You see, when we get to the place where we realize those mistakes that we're choosing to make, they have consequences. We look at, jumping forward to New Testament application, we look at Romans 6:23, "For the wages of sin is death." That there are consequences for what we do. But the gift of God is eternal life. That there are rewards and things God wants to do in and through us and continue to bless us. But we have to make that choice of where we're going to live. We have to make the action and that process of moving from where we were into what we're going to do. Are we going to remain in the sackcloth and the place that we become so desperate and just kind of beside ourselves? Or are we going to clean ourselves off and ask for that forgiveness that washes us and cleanses us? Are we going to put on the new clothes and go back to what God had called us to do, to worship him and continue to live in the areas he has called us and placed us in? I've talked a lot over the last year about action and about doing. And there's a reason for it, is because over and over throughout Scripture, you see God calling men and women to be active. That there are times where we do need to take rest, and we have those times of Sabbath, but more often than not, there is something that God is calling us to do. It may be smaller, it may be larger, it depends on where you're at, but there is this action that needs to take place. And the first is to clean yourselves off, to return to worship, and then follow up and do what he's called you to do. And so we're going to take communion this morning, and if there's anything that needs to just kind of get off your chest, if it's kind of that restarting, that relaunching, whether there's things that have taken you down paths, whether it's inactivity or idleness or whatever it may be, this is going to be a time to get things right, to be able to come up and take the body and bread, to dip it in his blood that was shed to cleanse us, to remove our sin, and since it's snowing outside, wash us even cleaner than the snow. So in this time, we're going to break bread and take communion. And as you feel led, go ahead and come up. Callie and I are going to serve communion to you. Again, the act, or the process of action calling us to step out and do something. And so if you will, go ahead and stand with me and pray. Heavenly Father, We thank you for this time and this opportunity that you have given to us. And as we break bread and remember your body that was broken for us, we pray that we would remember the sacrifice that you gave. How your body was broken for us and nailed to the cross. And as we take of the cup, that we would remember your blood that was shed and poured for us. That through your sacrifice and the blood that was shed, we can see freedom and live eternally in your presence again. So, Father, we pray that you would forgive us of our sins, that you would remove them from us, that they would not haunt our past, and we'd be able to move forward a new and cleansed creation in you. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Will you stand with me as we